Hello, everyone. My name is Pearl Monique Colbrunt. Thank you so much for coming to Pittsford Celebrates Stories That Inspire. First of all, I would like to thank Nazareth College for letting us be here, as well as my committee members, Jackie and Christine, for all of the hard work in helping put this together. I would also like to thank our speakers for coming. But most of all, I would like to thank you for coming. So whether you are watching this and it's already happened, we have another one on June 5th, or you are here with us today, you are greatly appreciated. As you may know, a couple of years ago, Juneteenth became a national holiday. And that left us all wondering, what does that mean? Because for decades, it has been the celebration of African Americans, almost exclusively. But with it becoming a national holiday, we have to figure out, how do we celebrate as a nation? But not only is a celebration, we also have to come to terms with why it's even a thing in the first place. So if you don't know, Juneteenth marks the freedom of slaves in Texas after the Emancipation Proclamation and long after the war began. There are still people, some 250, that were freed but continue to labor without knowledge until the Union troops went to Galveston, Texas and released them. Now, unfortunately, we do know that slavery has not gone away completely. Legalized slavery in America has, but we still have many other issues, not just in this country, but around the world, of human trafficking. There's a lot of different things that are happening in this world, and it is hard to sleep at night sometimes, and it's hard to figure out what an individual can do to solve any of these problems. As a parent, teaching my child history, teaching them about current affairs, we often have to discuss things like global warming. We have to discuss things like racism. We have to discuss things about growing up. How do you become a good citizen, a good person? How do you live in a community with other people who are different from you and get along? These are all skills that we don't only need to have as a child, but we need as adults as well. Today, we are going to listen to 3 different speakers, and I genuinely have so much appreciation for not only the speakers themselves, because they're really cool people, but for the work that they have done. It is not easy to get up every day and do your normal things. Some days you just want to lay in bed. Some days you want to go on vacation. Some days you want to play Xbox all day long, or maybe that's just me. But the thing is that some days you just have to get up and do the thing. You have to go to work. You have to eat breakfast. You have to feed your family. But you don't necessarily have to help other people. Helping other people is an active choice. It's a choice that you see someone in need and you decide to help them. You stop whatever plans that you had for the day and you help. And often we wait for those opportunities to come along, because it's not that we're bad people. I don't think most people are bad people or disingenuous or selfish even. But we kind of wait for the opportunities to come along. So if we happen by someone like a flat tire, you see them on the road, then we'll stop and help them. Or we see someone who spilt their groceries on the floor, and we stop and help them. But sometimes we see people who have problems, and it feels like we don't have the tools or the resources necessary to stop and help them. How many people have you passed on a street with signs? There's a study shown that people become dehumanized, where you don't actually see the person anymore, where they've dressed up family members and friends as homeless people, put them in the path of their loved ones on their way to work, and they were completely dismissed. And how often do we do this in our lives? How often does the brain think, okay, that's not something I can help with, so I'm going to move along? And so the whole point of the conversation tonight is just to take a moment and think, actually, is there something we can do? And I'm not suggesting that we all become dedicated activists, that we all sell our houses, move into a van, and travel the country, speaking the good word about community and love. But I do think that if we look at our lives, everyone, wherever we are, whoever we are, there is going to be an opportunity to help someone else. There's going to be an opportunity for change. And the reason why we're having this conversation as part of our Juneteenth series is because there is a deep history of racism, of bigotry, of hate in the United States that has been systemic. It has been in the laws. It has been in people's hearts for years. And more so, it has been in the background of many, many decisions, our subconscious. And it's not just white people hating black people. And I think we have a lot of the us versus them mentality. And the problem with the us versus them mentality is that it always will separate us versus them. When you're in a community and you want to build something that's greater than yourself, something that's going to serve more than yourself, it can't be us versus them. It has to be us. It has to be we. And in order to do that, we need to open up our minds and our hearts and figure out how can this work together. But not just, let's do it. It has to be respectful, right? We have to be honest. We have to be honest with ourselves. And we all have to be willing to learn something. Be teachable. That's one of my favorite phrases. You don't know everything. Be teachable. I learn something all of the time. I'm an academic-minded person, and I like to read a lot of white studies, and it's really interesting because whenever you talk in general about racism and the problems that we have in this country, it's almost always white people versus black people. You use terms like white privilege, but it's not necessarily used to describe a cause or a state of being or a social construct. It's often used as a derogatory blame of you have this because of white privilege. And it's not necessarily untrue that white privilege has played a huge role in why some people have been left out of things. But that's not the only thing. There was a study that showed small children. It was, I think, kindergarten. And they had to, and the teachers were told that the kids were told they would get a reward if they reported on the bad student. And this was a mixed group of children, girls, boys, different ethnicities. But the real study was about the teachers, and they used eye tracking software to figure out what the teachers were watching for. And all teachers, including the black teachers, watched the black boy 75% more than they looked at any other child. And we're talking about preschoolers. They were watching because everyone subconsciously thought that that was going to be the problem child. Now, all of these kids were actually actors, and there weren't any problems. There wasn't anything to report. But everyone's attention was there. And there have been numerous studies about how the black image is affected by racism. When everything that you see, until very recently, all of the Barbies were white, and that was the epitome of beauty. And then for a while, back in the 80s when I was a child, they had black Barbies, but they had all white features. It was just the skin tone. They had white hair and white lips and white body shape. What message does that send when you have a lack of representation? So you can look at a child and tell a child, oh, you're beautiful. But if literally everything else in your society is telling them something different, if all of the feedback that they get is different, what are we really teaching them? So just verbalizing that my prayers are with you, my thoughts are with you, you are beautiful, is not enough. We need action. We need people to not only change their mindsets, but really understand what is going on. Like, what are the mindsets that need to be changed? Really acknowledging that you don't know what you don't know. And I think that's another part of the problem. You don't know all of the things that you don't know. And so coming to a talk like this, where you can hear from a variety of different people, is really the best way that I can see on how to do better. Because like Maya Angelou said, once you know better, you can do better. But you have to know better first. And before I turn the mic over to the speakers, there is one more thing I would like to say, because I've heard it quite a bit. When I first wrote my speech and put it online for Pittsford Celebrates Juneteenth.com, check it out, I was told that it was too inclusive. My speech was too inclusive. My speech included too many people. That Juneteenth is a holiday for Black people. There are a lot of Black Americans who actually don't agree with it being a national holiday. And we had to have many discussions, even in our committee, to decide, okay, what does Juneteenth mean to us? What is it that we would like to put forward and do? Is there a way that we can be helpful? If we are helpful, is there a way that we can be respectful? Right? Is there a way that we can be honest? We don't want to be disingenuous. Even though we talk about hope and uplifting each other, which is completely true, that's not all that is there. There's a reason why people need to be lifted up. It's because they're down. So there's an honesty and there's a truth here. And also, there is a real truth behind things being taken away from Black people, right? Like, this isn't just people making it up or getting an attitude for no reason. This is a very real problem that we have. And also, there's a thing about inviting people that aren't Black to speak. And I'm going to talk about that too. A community is us and we. Our society should be us and we, and not you and them. I agree that people, no matter what the topic is, should speak on what they know. And so if you don't have a direct experience with something, perhaps that's not your venue. I get that. But again, before you judge, why don't you listen to what people have to say? So that's what I'm asking everyone here today. And again, if you're still watching, thank you, you're listening. But let's turn the mic over to the people who are doing things. Because again, what today is about inspiring, is about figuring out in your daily life, whoever you are, wherever you are, what can you do to make a difference? And the first step is understanding what the problem is. You don't understand what the problem is, you can't help, right? So thank you. And our first speaker, I'm going to bring up Jackie, who's going to introduce our first speaker.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us live. This first speaker is somebody that I hold very dear to my heart. About 8 years ago, he became my neighbor. Him and his wife moved in next door, and they had a teeny little baby who's going to be 8 this year. And then they kept popping him out. A little beanie, a little yay. And now I spend a lot of time over at their house. We talk a lot about serious things. They're my family. Mr. Vincent, Isaiah French.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in. For all those that are home watching, I definitely appreciate you taking the time to invite me here on this venue to be on stage. So again, thank you so much for that. Who I am, it needs to be stated, and it's kind of start from the beginning as far as my why and who I am as an individual. My why started back in 1987 when I was adopted. My brothers and I am a triplet, so there's two more of me, all boys, and then I have a brother and then a sister. The five of us appeared on WBZN, a channel, a CBS affiliate out of Boston with Jack Williams' Wednesday's Child. And we told our story of how we wanted to all be adopted at the same time. And so there was a social worker from the Catholic Family Center in Monroe County named Audrey Cummings who was doing a Passover in Boston. She saw the news story and she said, I need to bring this back home. And she did. And fast forward, the five of us together were adopted. Normally they split you up and let God figure it out, but in this situation, this very rare moment, the five of us were able to live together and grow up and know each other and learn each other. And I'm very thankful for that. But in doing so, I find myself being very, in that situation, very traumatic situation. We're being separated from our family and those that we love, and we have to try to form bonds with individuals that we don't know. And that could cause a lot of angst in a young person's life because they start to find themselves doing things and saying things in order to fit in, right? And I was that person. At 16 years old, I found myself splashed across the Democratic Chronicle for a crime that I committed. I was a square peg trying to fit into a round hole, hurting myself. Never having anyone to say, you don't need to fit in or nor should you try. Right? I didn't have that person there. That intervention never came. And then even in school, the adults that were in my life there to help and teach me, there wasn't that intervention, or at least that strong intervention where they could wrap their arms around me and said, hey, we see you aspiring, let's do this thing that's going to support you and help you to come out of it. I still found myself there in trouble. But it was the advocacy of wonderful individuals in my life that allowed me to realize my dream at 12, since I was 12, of becoming an educator. And so when the courts and the prosecutors wanted to hold me accountable in that space and place, the attorneys there said, no, let's allow this individual to come back from it. And I did. And I continued to spiral up. And I found staff members and teachers and mentors to help pour into me so much so that at some point my capacity began to build, and then I became that decanter or gourd of sense where I was able to now pour into other people, to other young people like myself. And I became a teacher. And so I cut my teeth in New York City, working at Erasmus and in School for International Studies, and then also ended up working in Section 5 of Co-op City in the Bronx. And then I decided to come back home after having my first child in 2015, Carrick. I was happy to come back home. And Walter Thoreau says, don't just be simply good, but good for something, right? In his book, where he's living out in the wilderness for a long time there. I think it's called Walden, right? And so I returned home, but not only to teach in Rochester, but also work in 14621, the community where I grew up at. And so I got a chance to work at School 8. And there, I ended up forming relations with students, and I explained to them, like, my why wasn't the textbook thing, wasn't some after-school special, but it was because I lived it, that it was real, that there was a sense of authenticity to what I was saying, that it was important that they listen, because we don't have time. We don't have the luxury of time, right? And that we need to be able to ensure that we're advocating for people. And so in that classroom, I was able to advocate pushing for students to have extra time when they didn't necessarily have an IEP or a 504, just being there to listen to them and talk with them, not at them or to them. And then fast forward, I found myself working in Pittsford Central School District as the first black administrator, well, I assume is the first black administrator in the history of the district. And in that space, as the coordinator of equity of inclusivity, I then began to advocate and continue to push and look for ways that all students, not just black students, right? Because when I first started, I came in a space and time where there was a lot of social unrest, right, during COVID, with a lot of individuals across the country dying and being killed at the hands of officers and people within the community that were there to protect them, right? We had Breonna Taylor, and even here in Rochester, we had an incident, right? And so I was able to then come in during that time, but understand and lay down the groundwork that my position, who I was, right? In order to change hearts and minds, in order to inspire change, in order to be the embers of change, right? To inspire hearts and challenge minds, right? And to have that transformational change in society needs to start here, needs to start with us, but it also needs to start with the elevation of students, right? It needs to capture the student's voice, right? What do they need? What do they want, right? What platform needs to be created in order for them to be uplifted, in order to be valued, heard, and appreciated? And so in my work there, I then began to advocate and continue to push, right? And continue to ensure that students' voices were heard. Even within the community, with my work with Save Rochester, we found ourselves going back into the city, partnering with organizations like Amazon, food baskets, and Lori's food baskets as well, in order to bring forth nutritious food, where otherwise it would have been a food desert. Right? All these things are about inequity. All these things are about the constricting of a person's identity, of who they are, of who they're meant to be. Right? I think Switchfoot said that this is our life. The band Switchfoot, they said, this is our life. Are you who you need to be or who you want to be? And it's such a small phrase, but it's so powerful. Are each of us doing what we need to do in order to be who we are, our authentic self? Not the people that other people say we need to be. Right? Not our parents, not folks within our family or even our culture. Are we who we are authentically ourselves? Right? Walking, breathing, being, existing. Allow our gift to make room for us where we can just be unapologetically ourselves. Intentionally ourselves. And so I appreciate this platform in order to be able to speak today, because as we sit and wonder, what are the inroads that we can access change? It doesn't have to start up here. It can start very small. It can start within your own community, right? Whatever space and place that you're in, right? It doesn't have to be a student that you're working with. It can be the elderly person, or a different person outside your own race even. Wherever you're at, there's change that can happen every single day, and it's that advocacy, right, that allows a person to reach their full potential. I want to take a step back, right, because I wasn't completely thorough in my explanation. When those attorneys there stood before the judge to say, nay, let's allow this individual, let's allow Vincent Fringe to be able to come back from whatever he is doing, right? In that moment, I felt seen, I felt heard, I felt valued, I felt appreciated. I didn't feel judged as a young black kid growing up in the northeast side of Rochester, New York, in 14621, who was on a free reduced lunch. I didn't feel that person, but I felt like I was seen as a human being, right? And in doing so, right, I was able to then realize my dream of becoming a teacher. I realized my dream of being able to make impact in my own life. And so every time I find myself in a space and place, it's how can I leave this situation better than I walked into it? How can I make someone's life better? How can I serve? How can I serve? Right? How can I serve? There's no point of getting and amassing if we're not being good stewards. Right? We're all here to serve. We're all here to be good stewards with what we have. Whatever blessings have been bestowed on us, whatever good fortune we might find, whatever our hard work produces, it's important that we are good stewards and that we're serving and that we're finding ways to honor each other and that we can learn a lot from each other through just telling stories, through talking. Right? Malcolm Gladwell talks about that in his book, A Conversation with a Stranger. The things that we learn, the things that we are able to realize what we don't know by just talking and really having that sense of appreciation. And so my hope is that in hearing this brief story that you are also able to reflect on your own life, that you're able to look at how is it that I can use my experiences to create change in someone's life. Because I promise you in doing so, 20 years later, that person might be able to come back and say thank you. Right? And 20 years later, right, that person might be able to say, look what I became because of your advocacy. Not only did I then become the first black administrator in the history of Pittsford Central School District, but most recently, I then was able to spiral back and tell those same people thank you. And because of your advocacy, look where I became. And in so doing, I now will become the first inaugural Monroe County Public Defender's Office Diversity Coordinator, where I would then use that time and space and that platform to advocate for individuals like myself during that time who made poor decisions for whatever reasons, for the trauma, right? Because they were trying to fit in, right? But understanding that everyone deserves that grace, everyone deserves that appreciation of who they are, and that they can come back from that. So again, thank you so much for your time, and I do appreciate this platform to be able to speak. And I will hand the mic over now to none other than Honorable Ms. Pearl Brunt. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing your story. Before I introduce our next speaker, Mr. Herb Smith, who is genuinely one of my favorite people. I don't really get to see him enough, but he is like the coolest dude I know. He's over here laughing, but it's true. He's laughing because it's true. When I first heard about Herb Smith, it was a few years ago, the first time I did a Juneteenth celebration, which was actually before it became a national holiday. And a friend of mine, Matt, said, hey, why don't we get Herb Smith? I was like, who's Herb Smith? And I looked him up, and I listened to his music. I was like, yes, let's get Herb Smith. We have to get Herb Smith. And then I begged him via email for weeks. Hi, this is Pearl Brunt again. I'm doing Juneteenth in Pittsford, and we'd really, really love it if you could come perform for us. Please, thank you, please. Hi, I don't know if you got my other message before, but this is Pearl Brunt. I'm over here in Pittsford, and we're doing Juneteenth. I found your number on your website, and please call me back. Thank you. Please, please, please. So he came out, and it was fantastic. But really, besides being an amazing musician, he is genuinely an amazing person. And one of the things that I love the most about his story, and again, it's really just his mere existence. So he is the first full-time paid person of color in the RPO, African American, in the Rochester Philharmonic Orchestra. The first and still the only. And I know that sounds like an amazing achievement, and I don't mean to take anything away from Mr. Herb Smith, but I love it because it's one of those examples of what racism looks like that you don't think about. You know, when people think about racism, or the new term is ethnism, because again, we are all the human race, and I kind of totally agree with that. But you think about direct hate. You think about people calling you the N-word. You think about people telling you, you can't sit here. You think about people telling you, well, actually, I can't say that in front of people, but it's bad things. You think about direct hate, people actively stopping you from doing something, directly preventing growth. But we now know there's this thing called redlining. And there's so many different ways that racism and people who were racist but also in charge of creating laws and rules, or the people who have money and resources and choose what to do with them, have left other people out on purpose. And this is one of those stories. I'm sure at some point, especially considering the history of Kodak and racism, about hiring practices and things, and just everything at the time, because that was America. I'm sure there was a time where they didn't want black musicians. Even if the best pianist came in, they'd say no because they were a person of color. That is no longer the case. Instead, we are suffering from generations of racism where people have been pushed into the city, not allowed to grow, pushed into poverty. Lots and lots of other wills are going. That means that we now have a huge amount of young people of color who don't have access to music. In the schools, they don't have the music programs that they used to. People don't have the time or resources to pay instructors to get musical instruments. And so it's not about being told no because you're a person of color, but it's about the complete lack of access to music for a generation of young people, so that when they become of age, they don't have the experience to be able to apply to be a performer for the RPO. Before they even begin, they've been cut down. How many inventors and engineers and artists are there that are being failed on a daily basis because of where they're born and how they're born? That has nothing to do with their potential. And so when you say that someone is the first, especially in America, like Black History Month, we like to throw that around a lot. Ooh, this person was the first baseball player, that person was the first astronaut. And it's not to take away from them, because honestly, if that person was the first, they probably went through a tremendous amount of racism and hard work to prove themselves. You have to work faster, harder, longer in order to be able to compete, in order to be able to be seen. But really, you should say they're the first person of color allowed to be in that role, because there were others that were talented, that were intelligent, that had the skill, but never broke through. So we need to be a community, a nation even, dare I say, that has soft soil, that is going to fertilize and help things grow. You shouldn't have to push through the rocks. It's fantastic when people do, and I love that people do. But we should be feeding you as a community. We should be helping you grow. We should be looking at the children and figuring out what do they need and trying our damnedest to give it to them. So with no more ado, Herb Smith.
Hello, thank you very much. My name is Herb Smith. I am a musician. I have been a musician my whole life. When I was a baby, sitting on my father's lap in church, he was singing and I was singing, and that still carries. I started playing trumpet when I was 9 years old, and I'm 53 and I haven't quit yet, so we're going to keep going with that. But I love this platform because I believe that everyone can do something to help. Regardless of your station, your race, your place, you can do something to help right where you are, right in your roundhouse, in your lane, per se. You can help. And I hope this story inspires you to help, because I was inspired to help, and it's just a wonderful thing to do something that you know that you're, you know, it goes to this. My father-in-law used to say, "How do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. One bite at a time. And if everyone takes a bite, that elephant will get eaten." Sorry, elephant. Let's talk about dinner. How about dinner? So I was hungry. I decided I would go to a restaurant. And I parked my car in a parking lot that was right across from the restaurant. I didn't know that parking lot was owned by someone that wasn't a part of the restaurant. So that person came to me and was upset that I was parking in his lot, and I was like, okay, no problem. I'll move my car. The person got a little heated, and I remember being very self-conscious, being a bigger black man, and I was speaking to a white person, shorter white person. I was being very self-conscious about the picture of me being aggressive. So I was just very hanging back and just kind of being chill about it. That person took offense by me parking in his car, and just so happened that the police happened to be there, and they came and saw us talking and asked if there was a problem. And I said, nope, there's no problem. I'm going to move my car. And this person was very demonstrative about me parking in their lot. And the policeman, seeing my demeanor, said, sir, why don't you park your car, leave your car where you parked it, and then go get your food from the restaurant. So I did that. Like, thank you, policeman, for helping me there. And then I come out of the restaurant, and the policeman says to me that this person wants to press charges against me. And I was kind of, didn't understand why, because I didn't touch the person or anything. And it actually, they pressed charges, and it was basically harassment in the second degree is what the charges were. So fast forward to, I would say, a few weeks later, I get a summons in the mail, and it says that I need to report to the jail to get a release ticket, and I would have to go to court. Something in me told me to call my friend who's a lawyer and just have him look it over. Well, he looks it over, and it turns out that somehow this person had figured out a way that when I turned myself in to the police, I had to go directly to jail. There was no get out of jail free card. I had to go directly to jail. And interestingly enough, the worst thing that happens to you turns into that catalyst to help you. So my lawyer told me to go to jail at midnight so that I could just be in there one day and it wouldn't be like a whole day, and that they would have me to come out in arraignment the next morning. So that's what I did. I turned myself in at midnight. They handcuffed me, the whole thing. The policeman was actually trying to figure out a way for me not to go to jail because he just thought it was such a weird situation. But needless to say, I went to jail that night. So I spent one night in jail, and inside that jail, I was just kind of using it as a time to chill. I meditated. I kind of just relaxed. It was cold in there. I was trying to stay warm. And the only people in there were young black men that were in that jail cell with me. So I'm like, okay. So then the next day, they take us to arraignment at the courthouse. I go into the courthouse, and inside the courthouse, in that jail cell, it was full of black men, full of young black men. I was the oldest person there. They were all young. They were super smart, super with it. I couldn't believe, the things they were saying. People were asking, so what are you in for? Okay, you're in here for this. Okay. Who's your lawyer? Oh, that guy? Oh, man, he's terrible. Who's your judge? Oh, okay, that judge is good. All you got to do is this, do this, 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 and this. Who's your judge? I mean, they had the whole system worked out. And I'm sitting in that jail cell, and I'm thinking to myself, okay, I'm 53, and I've never been here. I've never been in a jail cell before. Why? Why? What's the difference between me and these young men in this cell? What's the difference? And I'm just thinking about that. I wasn't there thinking, oh, I'm better than these young men. I was just thinking, why wasn't I here? What did I have that these kids didn't have, maybe? So as I'm sitting there thinking, I'm thinking, okay, I had a father. I had a father who was there for me. I had men in church, the deacons. I had Brother Banks and Mr. Pitts and Brother Madison every week, and they were all professionals. They all worked. They had jobs. They worked. They had cars. They had homes. They had families. That's what I aspired to. that was a model for me. And then the other thing that I had was trumpet. When I was a kid, I had trumpet. When I would get upset, I'd go downstairs and play my trumpet. When I was happy, I'd go downstairs and play my trumpet. It was a comfort for me. It was a focus for me. It was a thing that was mine, that I could really work towards. I had goals. So as I'm coming out of the jail, I'm just like, what can I do right in my lane? I'm not a politician. I'm not a nutritionalist. I'm not a doctor. I'm a musician, and I'm a man. What can I do? And then that's when it came to me to do Herb City Trumpets. Herb City Trumpets is a program for young black men. It's a mentoring program, and it's how to learn to play the trumpet. So the kids come in, I got a trumpet for you. That's one of the things I always say, hey, come on, you want to learn trumpet? I ain't got no trumpet, Mr. Smith. I got a trumpet for you. Come on in here, I'll teach you trumpet. So every person gets a brand new trumpet. We have lessons on Mondays and Tuesdays, and then some other days it's just for makeups. And then on Fridays, we have a get-together where we all come together and we have a meal together. And that was just something that I thought would be like something to bring them in, you know, to have a meal. But that actually turned out to be one of the most important parts of the program. Every week, I would bring in different types of food just to broaden the spectrum, their palate. So everything from sushi to Mediterranean to soul food to Chinese, just all kind of different types of food. And one little quick story was I brought in some food from Louisiana. We had fried catfish and jambalaya. And I opened up the food, I gave the food to one of the students, and the student is just chowing down on the fish, just chowing down on the fish. And he says, "These are the best chicken fingers I've ever had." And I said, "Those aren't chicken fingers, that's catfish." And as soon as I told him that, he put it down and he would not eat another bite. That kid today loves sushi. He had never had sushi before, but it was a thing. Every week, you have to try it. So just that little part of opening up palates, opening up minds, opening up, getting you out of your little circle was something that I did not expect to happen. But the focus of the trumpet, the food, the gathering together of people, the being around a man, a black man that's got them. I don't take no mess from the kids. I'm like, hey, stand up. Nope, we got to do this. Nope, you can't do that. So having that type of structure, having that type of model of someone that is being themselves and showing forth that strength within of just being who you are, that's what I had when I was growing up. And being in that jail cell, seeing those young men in there inspired me to right where I am, right what I'm doing to help. And so I feel that everyone, if you're a doctor, if you're a nurse, if you work wherever you work, if you're a garbage man, whatever, garbage person, you can help. One bite. That's all we need to take, one bite. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Herb. So I'm also very excited to introduce our last speaker for this evening, Her name is Tina Paradiso. I remember the first time I met her, I was looking to have some t-shirts printed, I think. And I go into her office, and she's got a dog, she's got people going around, it's kind of crazy in there. And I was a bit suspicious, if I'm honest, because I'm one of those people, like, okay. Like, can I see the products, maybe like touch them, feel them, see what's going on? It was crazy. But it was cool, though. Like, everyone was relaxed and comfortable. I said, okay. So I sit down and I start talking to her. Someone comes in and they need help. And she's like, sorry, I gotta go, I'll be right back. So like, okay, I had time. I sat down, I was looking around her office, and it was really comfortable, but like, it struck me as odd. I couldn't put my finger on it. I went to the bathroom, and there was a shower. And I was like, okay, and like in the kitchen, it was full of snacks and food, and there was a big bulletin board where all of the employees were writing down things they like to eat. And when she came back in, I was like, okay, what's going on here? I think this isn't just a print shop. Can you please explain to me what's going on here? And she did. And I'm gonna let her tell her own story. But ever since then, Tina has been cool in my books. And she's one of those people, whenever we get together, even if it's just hanging out, we always end up talking about what's the next step? What else can we do? Oh man, that's really cool. Man, like, wow. Man, I think I can do something like that. And then, sure you can, let's do it. Let's get together, let's do it. I love it because she's always down for helping someone. She's the person, when I come across someone that needs help, that I'm like, oh man, Tina, I came across this person and they need a place to stay. What resources can I use? It could be 3 o'clock in the morning. Tina's gonna answer the phone. Tina's gonna get the resources together. Tina's gonna point you in the right direction. And one of the other things that I really like about Tina coming on stage and sharing her story with us is because it highlights another issue that we have. We talked a little bit about how racism looks differently. But there's also a lot of overlap, because sometimes it's not direct racism. Sometimes it is poverty, right? Sometimes a lot of experience of poverty. So we know that people of color have been forced into the city, particularly, let's just talk about Rochester, but we've seen this in different places across the country. People have been forced into the city, redlined. Legally, you couldn't even buy a house in Pittsford if you wanted to. There are some houses that still have on their deeds that you cannot sell the house to a black person, an immigrant from certain places within 3 generations, Jewish people, on the deeds. Like, this is a legal thing that really happened. Like, segregation is history, but still has long roots. And because of that, you have people living in the city, people that public education does not support properly. You have people graduating, if they manage to graduate, who can't read properly from city schools. Rochester city schools are some of the worst statistics in the entire nation. As high as Pittsford schools have ranked across New York, the city schools have ranked low in the entire nation. And so there's a lot of overlap. There's a lot of problems that come from poverty. And what Tina does is she works on that. And I like to think of it, and we have had a lot of discussions in our committee about Juneteenth. And everyone is so passionate about people. So are we doing it perfectly? Probably not. But we're doing it sincerely and from our hearts and from a place where we honestly just want to ask these questions of how we can help and find a solution, right? And sometimes we get into these conversations and we have really strayed outside the bounds of racial issues, and we've now gone into women's rights issues, and we're talking about, social justice issues with poverty, and also like all of the things, because there are a lot of issues. There are a lot of issues to talk about. And we always have to bring it back, like, okay, we're going to stay in our lane. This particular event is about Juneteenth. Let's stay in our lane today. And you probably will see something at another point because we are all very passionate about helping. But it's like a Twizzler. I think of it like the pull-apart Twizzler. You have all of these problems that are tightly bound together. You know, sometimes they're indistinguishable from each other. They look the same, they feel the same, you pull them apart, they taste the same, they're closely connected, they're together, but they're different. And if you take a big bite out of it, it's really chewy and hard to get down. You gotta peel it apart to really enjoy it. You peel it apart and you can actually retie a string. Like if you ever see a kid play with it, sometimes they make flowers out of them and they do all sorts of different things with them. And today, we're pulling on this one string. Right? And I love Tina because she's pulled on this string and that string and this string, and I bet she's going to be pulling on a different string tomorrow. So without much ado, Tina Paradiso.
My goodness, thank you. Thank you for inviting me here. Thank you for the opportunity to tell the story. I was initially going to start with my why, but I want to start with where I am now and what that looks like and why it looks like that. So I have 3 social enterprises and started a nonprofit about 1.5 years ago. I'm going to start with the biggest for-profit. It's a service that's of service. We do print t-shirts and do embroidery. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry across the United States. We're one of many in that space, even in Rochester, New York. But what we do is different. It's how we do it that's different. And when I originally started, 10 years ago, we started working with about 15 different organizations and agencies throughout Rochester and Monroe. With that, we were bringing in, and you're going to hear new terminology, and I'll give you the old terminology that goes with it. Old terminology, at risk. New terminology, opportunity young people. So our opportunity young people are between the ages of 16 and 24, and they come from various different groups. So we're working with those that are gang affiliated, re-entry, pregnant and parenting, differently abled, refugees, all of them coming together because we're a space for all humans. In our space, to Pearl's point, it's a little different. It feels a little different. We make sure that our kitchen is stocked for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and food to take home. We provide Uber and Lyft, equitable transportation, because it's not always safe nor convenient to be on public transportation. And if you go look at the old mapping of RTS and the new mapping of RTS, you're going to actually find modern-day redlining. We also provide childcare, which is a huge barrier to employment. We have a washer and dryer on site. And we have a full working bathroom with hygiene products. So we've been doing this for a number of years. And I want to tell you a story, and you've probably heard it from me once before. There was a young man that came to us. His name was DeAndre. And at the time when he came to us, he hadn't been in school since he was 16. He wasn't specifically looking for change. He was affiliated. He came to us in November. It happened to be a busy season for us. He ended up in his first 2 weeks learning to embroider. He embroidered over 350 bags. With that, he had come full circle, got a bank account, got his driver's license, was studying to get his high school equivalency. That April, he was invited to a youth conference, and at that youth conference, he was given a hard time by somebody in the audience. And it was interesting to me how hard she was on him. And what she said to him is, well, what exactly, after he gave his whole story, was honest about everything that he had done up to that point and where he was going. And she mocked him. And it was disgusting to me, right? What exactly do you want to do? And this young man, he had standing up at the podium, all of a sudden, saw his entire body shift. He stood up, his shoulders came back, his head came back, and he said, I want my own embroidery shop. What else would I want to do? And at that moment, I had tears in my eyes, and I was a proud working mom. I was a proud mom. When he got off stage, I said to him, DeAndre, are you serious? Is this something you want to do, or were you defending the shop, and our team and what we do? And he goes, no, I really want to do it. I said, okay, I got a rule of threes, right? So I'm going to ask you 2 more times. And if at the 3rd time you tell me you want to do this, I'm going to help you do it. You're not always going to like me. I'm going to push. I'm going to pull. But I'll get you there. I'll help you. And here's what we decided to do. He had a key to the shop, so the keys to the kingdom. He could use the shop without having to pay rent, didn't have to buy equipment, could use the thread, all the technology. No one really wanted to give a 19-year-old who just opened a bank account a line of credit, so we were his line of credit so that he could get his apparel and his blanks. Taught him about costing in a very interesting way. Profit and loss, went through all of that. And by May of that year, he had his first corporate customer. It's an urban clothing line out of Indianapolis. And then June, he was shot and killed. When that happened, it stopped our shop for an entire week. We grieved, we mourned, we remembered, and then we changed what we did. How did we change it? Did we change the physical pieces of what we did? No, that's not what we did. We changed the language that we chose to use, the questions we chose to ask. We pushed a little harder, right? Sometimes I was the mean mom, if you will, the mom, the shop mom, right? Ask the questions differently. Get in there. What is going on? What is the barrier? What does that look like for you? Are you safe? And how do we make sure you're safe so that you can move forward? So in that time, up to about 1.5 years ago, one of the things that I'd wanted to do was to take our shop, our philosophy, and our model and replicate it and duplicate it across the United States. So at the end of 2019, we were doing very well. The profit was there to be able to do it, to be of service through business. And I was starting to research where we were going to move our next shop. Because what I wanted to do was move people who are in imminent mortal danger to a safe space, whether it be across the country, in another city, whatever that needed to look like, to make sure that they were safe. But more than that, put them in an environment where they had work, connection to services, and housing. And then COVID hit. And then that didn't happen. But what did happen was, I got a phone, well, actually it was a Facebook message. It was 2 o'clock in the morning, to Pearl's point. I will pick up that phone every darn time. And it was a young lady. Her house had been shot up. And she was in imminent mortal danger. And she didn't have familiar support. And she said, I'm scared. I don't know what to do. I just know I need to get out of here. So I pulled up. I picked her up. And she now lives in a city far, far away, doing very well with stable housing, employment, and connection to the needed services. What I learned in that moment, through those days and the next 1.5 years, was that I don't necessarily need a shop in every city and every state. What I do need is relationships. And that became very clear. Because I can't just march into a new city and a new state and say, this is Tina Paradiso and this is what I need. And they're going, who the hell are you? So when we got this young lady to this new city, we had found some resources that were perfect for her. And so, of course, we take her in. We want to do an intake. I know the words to use. And they said, oh, okay, what agency are you from? What do you mean, what agency? We want to do a referral. No, what agency are you from? Imprintable Solutions. What is that? A print shop? And she said, no, we need a referral from an agency. Define agency for me. Oh, another nonprofit, and, another. Oh, okay, I'll be right back. So I made a phone call, called on one of my friends and said, what does this look like and how quickly can I make this happen? She said, a couple months. I said, I got 48 hours. Can you help a girl out? So within 48 hours, I had an EIN number, walked right back in there with my nonprofit and said, Community Resource Collaborative is here to refer. And the woman looked at me and said, who are you? I said, angry today that I had to do that. So one of the things that I really like to do, and that I actually love and thrive on it, is bring me a barrier. And let me figure out what that looks like so we can get around that barrier and break down that barrier. I am not rich enough. I am not powerful enough. I cannot dismantle systems as much as I want to. But what I know I can do is have conversations, form relationships, choose different words, and move people forward. Now, why do I do that? Now I'll tell you my story. So I'm the baby of 4 from a military family. I was a preemie. There's a joke about the preemie. I was told many years later, geez, Tina, they just did a study. If you'd have been a full-term baby, you would have been so much better off, right? Because you can't live to your full potential. Oh, thanks. Anyway, so we moved a lot. My dad was in the military for 13 years. My oldest siblings went to 19 different schools from K through their senior year in high school. So change is normal to me. Moving is normal to me. We moved every year. Fast forward up to 16, I was a rebellious child. And I remember my mom saying to me, and this was impactful, this changed the trajectory of my life. Tina Louise, yeah, Ma. You know what you're good for? No, Ma, please tell me. You are good for shit, good for nothing, and no damn good at all. I am 53, and I still remember that. And I still believe somewhere in my inner child, that I am good for shit, good for nothing, and no damn good at all. 17, I left home. 19, I was homeless. I've died twice. The first time that I died, I was trying to figure out why I was afforded a second opportunity. And I didn't know why. And we don't always get to know our why. My why is that I don't want our young people on the streets. I don't want them living in poverty. I don't want them homeless. A lot of what we're experiencing stems from poverty. I was there. Took me 4 years. Not an 8-week program, not a 6-week program, not a 9-month initiative. No, 4 years. So when young people come into my shop, it's not for a program. It's not for a specific period of time. It's until they're ready for their next step. Because I know what that next step looks like. I know how hard it is. I know every time I took 2 steps forward, it was 3 steps backwards, 4 steps backwards, 5 steps backwards. I know what that's like. And I don't want that for our young people. So, with every fiber of my being, I am not going to allow my young people to leave my shop and feel as though they are good for shit, good for nothing, and no damn good at all. I am going to love them. And that's what our shop is. Our shop is love. And that's why we do what we do. And I appreciate the opportunity to tell my story, talk about my young people, because it's the young people of the community. And you will find me not just on College Avenue. You will find me on Clinton, Hudson, Jefferson, Frost, doing outreach, bringing in young people, doing what we can, working with parole, probation, all the different centers that we have for our quote-unquote at-risk young people. They're our opportunity young people. They're our future. They need love, and they need help getting out of poverty. And I think if we solve that, we can solve a lot. And Pearl, I thank you so much for inviting me here.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, we've come to the fun part of today's function, the Q&A. So I'm going to invite our speakers back up on the stage. We're going to do a little furniture rearrangement and get some questions. 2 minutes. All right, everyone, we've gotten set up and we are ready for the Q&A part of this talk. So, does anyone in the audience have any questions, or shall I get us started?
If everyone could just share maybe that one young person who they worked with
All right, so the question is, can each of our speakers share that one young person that really touched your heart and inspired you?
Well, first of all, it's tough to just stick with one, right? There's many that we've probably worked with. Um, One of the ones that I remember was a young boy who came in who wanted to learn trumpet, and I was talking to the father, and the father was upset because I guess somehow or another he had called me, but I hadn't gotten in touch with him, but his next door neighbor did get in touch with me, so those kids had trumpets and his kid didn't. So he calls me and he's out the gate hot, you know, how come my student can't get a trumpet? I'm like, well, of course he can, but yes, I got a trumpet for you. And once I kind of cooled him down, then he asked me, he wanted to learn how to play the trumpet. So now I'm teaching him and his son, and they would come in and they would do lessons together and all this, and I didn't know at that time that he was really estranged from his son. They hadn't really talked much, and they really didn't have much of a relationship. And he was more of a taskmaster with his son. But in trumpet, the son actually was a little further along than him. So he had to ask his son how to play this note, or he had to be more, you know, in tune with what his son was telling him. And he told me that the trumpet brought them together, that the trumpet brought them, as you know, as a son and father and son, brought them together. And it's just amazing how you just start with one little thing, and then it just can blossom into so many different areas that you weren't expecting. So that's one.
Trying to say the best
Just
for last.
pass
there.
that mic right on over.
Excuse me. Thank you so much for the question too, and it is very difficult, especially in the sense that my life and my welfare has been at the behest of students, and so at any given time I would have about 25 to 30 students in the classroom that I'm trying to make and create impact with. But there are several students that come to mind, or several young people that come to mind when it comes to supporting them and providing advocacy. And one of that really changed my life was this one student who was always getting into trouble, always being written up, or receiving consequences from home. And he happened to be in my classroom at, I think, at one of the schools I was at. He was a 7th grade student at the time, so I had him for 2 years because I was an English teacher for both 7th and 8th grade. And so he came to my room and he proceeded to try to be himself, but everyone knew that in his heart of hearts he had such charisma. People liked him. They wanted to like him, but he would just do, quote unquote, these naughty things. But I looked at those things as leadership abilities or capacity for leadership. And so I would put him in a position in the classroom where he would be a leader, and there would be a level of accountability there as well. But that originally started when he wasn't a student in my classroom. And so he was a 6th grade student at the time, and he was in the same school building, but I intervened because he was having an episode in the hallway, to which his mother then came in. There was a whole parent meeting, but in that moment, he realized that what I was doing and trying to intervene was trying to de-escalate the situation, but also put him in a place to be successful, so that he can also feel heard and that his needs at that moment could have been met, because they wasn't, or he was used to not having those needs met. He was acting out, and from there we formed a relationship. It wasn't even just like a student-teacher, but more of like a big brother kind of thing. And he really gleaned a lot from me, and so much so that when he came back to quote-unquote regurgitate, it wasn't just like a rote response that he was giving me of things that I said or how I inspired him, but you saw a sense of understanding that he really processed that, and he started to inhabit some of the advice that I was giving to him. And he invited me to his graduation when he, across the stage in 12th grade, and then he came back to tell me how, he ended up getting a full ride scholarship to Arizona University, free ride on football, and how, he realized then that it wasn't something that I was saying to him trying to control him, but more so he realized now that we were trying to set him up for success. And so he really appreciated that, and he was able to then articulate that too. So that kind of really changed me, and it put the wind back in my sail too, because I think it's important to show gratitude and grace just to let people know that what they're doing is impactful. So.
From my story, it's obviously DeAndre who was the most impactful, changed the way we do things. We go a little harder, a little faster. But to be honest, I love them all to their core because they all have different things that they're bringing to their own table. They're all courageous, and they're all doing their own heavy lifting, whatever that looks like for them. They all come in different, you always say meet people where they are. So we do a lot of that. And each individual that comes through, each team member that comes through, they're all in different phases and spaces of their life, and they're all loved. So DeAndre just happened to be the most impactful.
Sorry, real quick. So I like how you said they bring a lot to their own table and not the table. I like that. I never heard it said that.
It is, yeah, thank you.
Yeah, that was powerful. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to
No,
walk
thank
you.
No, I was actually going to say something about that too. Like they bring their own table. I love that a lot. Yeah, that's nice.
You heard it here, everyone. Pittsford celebrates, stories inspire, blows minds. All right, I do have a question. I would like to know who inspired you as a child, who inspires you now, and why?
For myself personally, I think my first inspiration was Malcolm X. And so growing up, they used to call me Little Malcolm. And like I said, I was in foster care for a very long time. But before I lived with my second family, who I knew as the Randolphs and mom and dad, for me, I lived with another older couple who my brothers, when they were put in foster care, my triplet brothers, Desmond and Victor, they would end up living with the family called the Walkers. They were an elderly couple. But the wife's name, Miss Claire Walker, her maiden name was actually Little, and she was first cousins with Malcolm X. Their dads are brothers. So for me, at a very early age, hearing Little Malcolm, and then I said, later on, I talked to some of my foster sisters within that family, and I said, hey, Darlene, why would you always call me, Little Malcolm? And she said, this is why. She sent me this picture from when I was in Rockland Nursery St. Coleman's with me with the horn-rimmed glasses looking like Malcolm X kind of thing. I was like, wow. And it's interesting because I've always had an affinity for Malcolm X, but I never necessarily knew why. And so for me, I always appreciated Malcolm X's ability to reinvent himself. And you see that being marked through his choice of names, where he became, Malcolm Little, and then he made the transition from Malcolm Little to Detroit Red when he was running the streets, and then to Satan, and then to Malcolm X, and then ultimately to El Hajj El Shabazz. So you see these marked transitions with his name and how he reinvented himself. And so for me, myself, my inspiration has always been Malcolm X, and I think it still is overall. In that, it's through reinvention that a person is able to discover their purpose and also harness their passion to create change. But then I guess today, right now, on the real level here, the people that inspire me are the people that I speak to every single day. It's the people sitting around this table, right? It's Tina, it's Herb, it's you, Pearl, it's everyone in this audience, in that we all can learn from each other. And so every day I wake up and I pride myself in being able to speak to anyone and about anything and learn from them and glean from them, because at the end of the day, life is about living, but it's also really too honestly about learning. It's more about learning than it is living. And if you're not learning, then you really are not living. So that's been kind of my inspiration.
All right, you're going to be known as Pass the Mic Tina.
I would say growing up, I had many different inspiring people along my journey. I can think of a band director, a trumpet teacher, my father-in-law, a pastor. I can think of different people, an older teacher that I met later in life when I was in my 40s, I had a trumpet teacher who was in his 80s. And he would just inspire me. He had kind of a, industry knowledge from before I came around that was really inspiring to know like what was before me, because he remembered those people. I would say, oh, what about, this trumpet manufacturer that was named Bach? And he would say, oh, Vinny. I remember Vinny. He knew him by his first name. So it was really inspiring for me to have someone in my life that could lead me that way. What inspires me now is really kind of the knowledge of, I like to call it infinite levels. Infinite levels inspires me. Like wherever you are, you can go deeper. Like there is no ceiling. And when I think about music, when I think about music and my trumpet, it's like I'm at a certain level or whatever, but it's like regardless of whatever that level is, it's deeper. You can go deeper. You can find more inspiration, That really inspires me because it's just like, it'll never get old. You can keep going and going and going and going. And I try to instill that into my students as well.
So when I was younger, it was actually my oldest sister. She got married when I was 6. I think I was 6. And as I got older, and I was the problem child. I'm not gonna lie, I was so bad. Anyway, but I would always say that she was the diamond, and I was the piece of coal. And it was if it took 1,000,000 years, I was still going to aspire to be a diamond. And I always think of how life pressures us, and it just keeps the pressure going. And someday, I'll be that diamond. Now, today, who inspires me? So, I'm old-ish, and it's the people that I work with that inspire me. And when I say that, I mean it's a Pearl that inspires me, a Rosa Marie, a Naisha, a Tati, a Devin, an Anthony, a Justin. I'm going to keep going. I could go on and on and on. A Janelle, a Crystal, a Diane, a Pedro, an Aubrey. And if you go look anywhere in my social media, you're going to find all of these people. They're the ones that inspire me, drive me, challenge me, help me evolve, push me, and humble me, and keep me humble. 100%.
Any other audience questions? The question is, what do you tell children who feel like they can't because it seems insurmountable?
I know. Change is difficult. Change is hard. And one of the interesting things is you learn what you live. And now you're trying to move forward and live something different potentially. And I tell them it sucks, but you can get there by eating an elephant one bite at a time. Literally, I use that. But it hurts. It's scary. One of the things that we do in the nonprofit, so yes, we have the workforce development. We do a lot of, one of the things that I'm a firm believer in is making sure that we have mentors and men and women in my shop that are helping lead the team that look like my young people, right? Because it does no good to have this white woman of privilege sitting behind a desk when 90% of your workforce are black and brown bodies, right? That is ridiculous to me. So that's why I make sure I have a Yakub and a Rosa and a Naisha and a Pearl and a Tati and a Pedro and everybody in that space. And I also want them to see that the majority of those in that space that are choosing to come in to mentor and be side by side have lived experience. So if I have a young person that has been formerly incarcerated, I have somebody else who's mentoring that has also been formerly incarcerated, that is in a different, they've moved through and walked through and gotten to a different space, so that they understand that this isn't some bull story, that this is real, that it is not easy, and it does hurt. It is scary. It does suck. But you're going to be a Herb. You're going to be a Vincent. You're going to be a Pearl. Step by step by step.
I just 100% in agreement with what you just said. That is, like, it's fantastic. I mean, the whole how do you eat an elephant is just a fantastic analogy, because that's what it is. You know, when I'm talking to my students, you know, it's like, well, I can't practice an hour. You know, I can't practice an hour. Can you practice 30 minutes? Can you practice 15 minutes every day? You know, I'll take just a little bite at a time. And as that happens, you can see it happen. Hey, I practiced for an hour yesterday. Of course you did. Because you took the 15 minutes, and then slowly you can chew more, you can eat more. The other thing that I do, though, with little kids, when it's the change, trying to change something, trying to break that inertia and go a different way, is I really do try to get the parents involved. I really do try to get the parents, because if you can get the parents involved, you can get them on board, you know, then, hey, Ivan, go practice your trumpet. And it's like, kind of like, okay, just practicing your trumpet, yeah, but that focus, that what it takes to do it every day, that's teaching you skills. It's teaching you skills. It's also changing your brain. It's changing your brain to think a certain way for any number of things that you're going to come across in your later years. So, yeah, parents involved, it really helps as well to help with the change.
And just to echo that, yeah, definitely, you know, that change is hard, and climbing that mountain is going to be rough. But you know, there's an old proverb that talks about climbing the rough side of the mountain, right? I was listening to Jay Electronica, and he talks about that. He says, you know, thank you for bringing me up the rough side of the mountain, right? The easy, smooth side, that's easy. But then, in all actuality, it's not beneficial, because you're really not climbing, you're really not striving. So that change is hard, and trying to change that inertia. You know, you going to the far left and trying to force yourself to go back to the right path does take input from a lot of people. So you can believe all day, you can speak life into your life all day, and what you're going to do, and have affirmations, and look in the mirror and say what you're going to do. But it also requires the support from people outside of you to speak your truth and tell your story, so that people, because you know, you entertain angels unaware. You know, and people are looking to help, but they just don't know where. And if they can just attach themselves to a cause and to a purpose, to a person, to a life, they're then able to get behind that person and call them. Like, I had a student who, it kind of reminded me of like a Finding Forrester thing with Sean Connery, right? Where he ends up meeting a young student who broke into his house and becomes his mentor, and he goes on to create like the next piece of writing in this fictional movie. But you know, having a student who had a dance instructor, he was a black student, and his dance instructor was white, an older white man who was a dance instructor at Brockport. And he was there every day, sending out emails to all the teachers and just advocating for the student. Like, I want to know everything. Like, I have the same power as the parent. I got the parents' approval. I want the reports, the progress reports, the report cards. I want to know what interventions are being done. And he was just on it, just advocating for the student. And man, it was beautiful to see that, because then it also allowed that student to feel empowered. It allows that student to move from the inner city, right there on the west side, with all the violence and everything that was happening, to rise above that. And he's, again, one of those students now that are just doing wonderful things at a D1 school right now. So it's really, you know, having those examples of it's hard. And again, everyone's different, right? Everyone's different. I know for myself, you know, making it more personal, that path wasn't straight. I was 16, continuing to spiral, and then I had to take my GED in jail. I had to get I didn't walk the stage with my senior class. I had to rely on the advocacy of counselors within the jail. One of them was Christine Reagan, who's now at RCSD downtown, but I keep in touch with her and just told her thank you. So trying to make that change is tough, but it requires having mentors, not just one, but 2 or 3 of them, and having them speak to each other so that they can come up with a game plan of strategies to support you in various realms that you're trying to aspire to.
What's one thing that we can do as community members that would spur and help our young people to find the help they need? Some people don't, or some of our young people don't think they need help. They're in trouble and they don't know it. What in your opinion is something that community members that may not be as civic minded and service above self that we can do?
I'm going to actually ask you to hold that question because it's going to fit in with another question that I'm going to ask. But not the very next question, but the one after that. So I want to bring it back to Juneteenth for a moment. And I want to ask, what is the most profound experience that you experienced personally or witnessed racism directly, that you either experienced or that you were there witnessing, and like that you knew immediately that it was racism and that it was a profound experience? Because again, a lot of times it's it's microaggressions, it's historic, it's always been this way, and you don't know, or you look back and you're like, oh man, that was really messed up. Like I remember when I was in 5th grade, and I had a racist teacher who used to mark my grades lower on my tests. I was a straight A student going into her class, and then I got C's and D's, and it wasn't until I realized that the kid that copied off of me, that copied the test off of me, got an A, and I got a C. And then when I compared our tests, she marked answers on my test incorrect when they were in fact correct. And then when my mom presented this to the teacher, she denied it, but the answers were the answers, and the principal refused to move me from classes, so my mom had to move me to a different school. And even still, I didn't realize that that was racism as a kid, because I was a kid. And it wasn't until years looking back that I was like, oh man, that was really messed up. It wasn't just the mean teacher, right? Because the whole system, the principal, everyone, it wasn't just that mean teacher. That wasn't what was behind her motivation. She did not like me because I was a naughty kid, because I was a goody two-shoes. Everyone knows it. I'm still called the goody-goody of the group. So what is a profound moment where it was instantaneous, that you knew, like in your gut, that this is racism, this is the legacy of slavery and bigotry and racism in America, and you feeling it right now, or you seeing it in someone else? I know you're not quiet because you don't have one.
Well, there are 2 instances that come to mind right now, and in much of my life has been, I've been fortunate to not necessarily have to experience blatant all-out racism. But again, racism as it stands now is very systemic and very covert, right? However, my first foray, if you allow me to say, was when I was in Boston. I was in Brockton, Massachusetts, and I was probably about 4 years old. And I gotta say 4, right? I was about 4 years old, and I was visiting my brother at the time, who lived in a different foster home with Diane and Butch Dorr, and I was going to visit him to say hello, and the neighbor came out, this young kid, he was about our age or so, but a little bit older, he probably was about 7, came over, and oh my goodness, he kicked me in my private parts, and I fell on the floor, and I remember just saying, like, my dad said that all of you are the N-word, and like, I remember looking up, and my brother rushed over and like just pushed him away and I think maybe punched him back or something. But like, I saw my brother protecting me in that situation, and the young kid just kind of ran away crying. And I realized that I don't think he really knew what really happened or what he was really doing, but he was just acting on something that he was taught, you know. And you just see like this hate coming out of him in that moment, both in a physical and then also just in verbal, and just kind of trying to dominate and staying over me. So that's something that I became acutely aware of at a very young age. So much so then now, fast forward. So in my current role, which will be, I'll be resigning soon to assume my new role as a diversity coordinator for Monroe County Public Defender's Office. But in my role at Pittsford, I pride myself in being able to go to the front door of the building. In my capacity, I had an ability to navigate all 10 buildings throughout the district at any given time. I could walk through a school, I had complete access, free reign of the entire Pittsburgh School District. And so I would always insist on going to the front door, both out of historical purposes, because at one point in time, black people were not allowed to go to the front door. They would have to circle on back or the side door or wait outside to be served or to enter any facility. So I prided myself on being able to go straight right through the front door, but I also did it so too as a place of security. Because I was the only black administrator in the district, I didn't want anyone to accuse me of trying to break into a building using a side door or what have you. So one day in visiting a school building, I go to the front door, and I've been going to this front door now since I started in the position, which was in November. It probably was about January, maybe February now. So I assume a lot of people should have known who I was because they advertised who I was before I even got there. However, as I'm going to the front door there, and I show my ID like I normally do, I'm getting ready to scan in, I was accosted, and the reception said, "No, you can't scan in. I have to know who you are." And I said to them, I said, "Well, I'm Vincent French. I'm here to meet so-and-so. And no, stop, I need to see your ID." And she demanded I show her my ID. And so I show her my ID, and then I'm getting ready to scan it. And she's like, "No, I still need to check." Like, again, just kind of give me a hard time. And so I kind of just dialed it back and waited a little minutes for her to call and verify. She finally buzzed me in. I go into the office to introduce myself. And as I'm getting ready to say, "Hello, I'm Mr. French. I'm the Director of Equity and Inclusivity for the district," she puts her finger in my face while she's on the phone to verify. "Mr. French said he's here to see you. Is this true? Is he lying?" And to which the person I was meeting rushed out quickly and was like, "Hey, whoa, no, he doesn't need to check in. He can just scan in like every other administrator does because he's from the district." And so that was really interesting to be able to have that conversation. And we were able to talk it out, and I came from a place of understanding, and I understood why she was being that way. But to me, what was demeaning was putting her finger in my face. And she did it so in front of other students too. And so that for me was problematic. It wasn't that she was saying you need to scan in and all, because I figured it was a place of safety that she was operating from. But how do you explain the finger in your face like that and held it there until she hung up the phone to then address me and say, "What is that you want?" So that was very problematic. And the administration in the building quickly responded when I explained to them the scenario. It went up to the superintendent as well, and the person ended up being removed. And this was a person, too, that not just did that to me, but also other students, where it was microaggressions as well. The other students were able to speak on and say, yes, this person was presenting microaggressions. So it took me to kind of be the sacrificial lamb in a sense in order to, weed out this person and get it removed. And what was interesting, it was, too, that I ended up receiving an email after the fact where instead of learning from this situation after our conversation, there was a sense of projection that was being done in the email where it was my fault. It was still my fault that she was being asked to leave or resign from her position. So I'm still trying to process that right now, but that was a big situation, most recently that had happened to me.
I'm sorry that happened.
That's a tough question that you've asked. Because, to me, racism is, I like to call it low vibration, is what I call it. It's just, to me, if you just look at like the DNA, there is no difference between one person and the other as far as DNA concerned. We're actually more like twins, regardless if you're black, white, whatever. Our DNA is 9.999999999 the same. You know what I mean? You know, so someone that's acting from a place of racism is acting from a place of ignorance. They don't know. You know, they're acting from a place of small heart or whatever you want to call it. So in this part of my life, when I see someone that's acting from a ignorant or acting racist, it doesn't bother me. It doesn't bother me when someone acts that way towards me, because I know that they don't know. I know that this person doesn't know. This person is acting from a place of ignorance. They don't know what the real deal is. So someone that doesn't know, why am I upset about how they're acting? You know, why should that affect me? You know, like if this table is actually black. This cover is black. Or someone says that's green, and they're very adamant about it. I'm like, okay, you can think that's green if you want to, but I know that's black. There's truth involved, you know. So in this part of my life, when someone acts that way towards me, you know, then I know I'm not bothered by that. So then I go to preface with the most blatant racism that I've ever seen in my life was when I was coming from a concert at Auditorium Theater, and a friend of mine had got tickets for it, and I think it was for like a country group or something, and a bunch of my friends decided we were going to go to it. So we're walking away from it, and someone in a pickup truck comes, it has to be a pickup truck, right? Is driving past us, and they're yelling, you know, hey, you, N-word, all this kind of stuff at us, right? And at that point, you know, one of the guys in our group was all upset about it. You know, he's like, oh, let's go chase them or whatever. And I'm just like, if a child said something to you like that, would you be upset by that? No. This person is obviously, you know, not operating from a place of intelligence. And you see that constantly in the world, you know, and so that doesn't mean that we don't do something about it to try to change people's perspective about it. But to me, when I see someone acting blatantly racist, I'm just like, wow, they don't know. You know, they are not operating from a place of intelligence. You know, I think some of the most racist things that I've probably experienced are some of the ones that I didn't even know happened. You know, like, you know, just like that job that I would have gotten, I just didn't get. You know, the opportunity to do this, I never even heard about that opportunity. You know, like that's some of the things I think that really, really hit. But I just really think that, you know, with this program that we're talking about and the June 19th, it's really kind of like, okay, this really shines a light on what the truth is. And then we can see the people that are operating from truth and people that aren't operating from truth. And someone that's not operating from truth, to me, that doesn't bother me. It doesn't bother me. Now, I'm going to do something about it. We're going to help. We're going to try to change that person's perspective. We're going to help people that are the victims of that those untruthful acts. But me personally, you know, it's like, okay. Did that answer your question?
Fair enough. Have you witnessed racism, Tina? Pick up the mic, Tina. Don't pass it, Tina. We're watching you, Tina.
I have witnessed racism. I know.
Sorry. This is serious.
It's my responsibility, I believe, as a white person and a white woman of privilege. Now, what I want to explain is, if you don't already know, privilege does not mean money. Privilege means, Vincent, you and I could have the same experience, the same things happen. My experience outcome ends up being different because I'm white. right? So it is my responsibility to call it out when I see it and to educate those that are ignorant. And I will give you, I got a lot of examples. I'll give you an example. There was a group of us who work heavily in the community together. And I happened to be the only female and the only white person in this group. And we were at a restaurant bar. We were at Char. And we were waiting for seats to open up at the bar. And when seats opened up at the bar, all 5 of us stood up. And there was a woman sitting on the end, right here, right up against the wall. And when we stood up and started walking forward, she had a visceral response. And my friend looked at me and he goes, "This is gonna be fun." And I said, "Yep." So we went up and I said, "I'll take that seat." And I sat down right next to her, okay? And I was also the smallest. I'm all of 5 foot tall. We have 11-year-olds in here that are taller than me. So I don't have a very imposing physical being. And we sat down, and she said, "Well, aren't you an interesting group?" I said, "Aren't we?" I said, "Do you read?" She said, "Yeah, I read." I said, "Cool, I got some books for you. Can you get your phone out? I want you to take some notes." And my friends are like, "Oh, shit, here she goes." So the books I gave her to read, Kendi's How to Be an Anti-Racist, White Fragility, The Nice White Woman, right? I gave her all those to read. I hope she did. I don't know if she did. But I'm telling you, those men next to me are not the ones that made her feel uncomfortable after that. It was definitely me. So.
Thank you for sharing that. And you know, it's interesting, right? Because we often talk about occupying spaces and representation and feeling welcome. And you know, particularly in Pittsford, there's a lot of conversation about how do we make everyone feel included? How do we bring more people of color? And it's funny, I belong to a fancy pants gym. And there are so many people of color at this gym. It was like a mecca. And I was like, this is where everyone's been this whole time. I've been here in Rochester for about 6 years, and most of the time I've lived in Pittsford. And actually, I've had a really pleasant experience. Everyone's been really nice to me. I felt welcome. I don't have any instances of which to complain. It's been lovely. But also, I don't see a lot of people of color when I'm at the shops or on Shane Place or at the library. And that's just the makeup. Like, not a lot of black people live here. And I asked people why, and there's this attitude that, you know, Pittsford is racist. And I disagree, but I do think that under that is the thing of they don't feel welcome. People of color who grew up in Rochester, people who are from this area, don't feel welcome. Equally, I've spoken to people who live in the other suburbs, Greece and Chilai, who also don't feel welcome in Pittsford. And whether or not that's because of something real that's happened or just perception, I honestly don't know why people feel the need to segregate themselves and to gather and feel like they can't move into other spaces. For instance, as a homeschooler, I travel around to all of the libraries. Like, they all have something different to offer. They all have different programming, and it's fun. But people don't. People stay in their areas. And I think, again, just in general, like human nature, people like to go to the pub that's down the street from their house, and they like to go to places that are familiar to them. So when you have someone step into a new space and you have that reaction, like if you weren't there, Tina, would they have felt comfortable staying after that lady reacted that way? You know, because again, I don't know that I would. I probably would have just left, you know, given my business somewhere else. If the wait staff or the people who work there didn't take it upon themselves to say, hey, actually, this isn't that kind of place. No, you can't stay here and treat people that way. If I didn't feel valued, It would have made me extremely uncomfortable. And I think the other thing is, and I think in part because I'm a woman as well, but physical safety is an issue. You know, if someone is giving me a feeling that I'm unwelcome there, I don't know if it's just an attitude problem or if it's going to become a physical problem at some point. And it's something that I think, you know, as an African American who has lived abroad quite a lot and traveled around, I think it is quite unique when I'm back in America, because I don't do this when I'm overseas. But in America, there is this constant awareness of, am I in a safe place? Who are these people around me? And will I have a problem? And walking to a situation like that, like a restaurant where someone reacted like that, would have sent me out the door, you know? And again, it's like all of these things that you talk about, all of these experiences, when you don't share them, you can't fix them. So I would like to thank everyone who's here, and we're gonna circle around to the last question, which Jackie asked.
What can we do as community members? One simple thing, maybe we're not all simple-minded, service-oriented. What's something simple and easy that we can do to include everyone in our community?
So as community members, individuals, what is one thing that we can all do to help?
I always put this question back on you. I always do that. Because people always ask me, well, what can I do? And I'm like, well, what can you do? What can you do? Where do you work? You know, look around you. Is there diversity there? Why? And if there isn't, then ask yourself, why? Then ask the next question. Well, what can I do to help this place right here where I am to make it more diverse, to have more people of color here, to have more representation here? You know, I went to a school concert, and they did actually talk. I was really happy that I went to. It was a private school concert that I went to, and I was just sitting there, kind of like wondering, okay, are they going to do anything diverse here? You know, are they going to do it? I was just wondering, and they did actually. They did do something diverse, and I felt like they could have done more. I thought they could have had more music or whatever, but I felt like, okay, they actually did try. They did something. You know, even though the makeup of this place was not diverse, the program did have some diversity in it. I'm saying, to me, that is a teacher in that moment saying, what can I do? You know, I can't get more black kids to come into the school in the middle of the school year, you know, but what we can do is we can talk about Martin Luther King. We can talk about, you know, Rosa Parks. We can talk about Harriet Tubman, you know. And so that was that teacher in that moment, in that space, finding a way to do something. You know, for some people that might be take some money and give it to the Boys and Girls Club, or, you know, for another person it might be in 48 hours come up with a nonprofit. You know, for another person it might be teach trumpet to kids. You know, I think each person has within them the thing that can help. You know, you have within them. It's not like it's like you have your own key to the lock. You know, you have the key. I don't have the key. You know, and so you have to find where that lock is and open it.
Well said. And pass the mic, Tina returns.
All the way to the end, all the way to the end. I kind of forced her, though. Yeah, just let her end up there. Just to kind of expand on that idea, you know, I definitely appreciate that, like, as far as bringing it back on the person that asked the questions, like, what can you do? I recall one time being an RA when I was at Alfred back in 2002 in Main Gate A. Shout out to Main Gate A, Alfred State College. And there was a student there who was from the southern tier, like near the Pennsylvania border. And, her name was Kedron. I can't remember her last name right now, but I probably won't say it just for security reasons. But Kedron had wanted a black roommate, and I remember having to find a different roommate at past the time of room selections. And I asked her, I said, why is it that you're specifying that you want a black roommate? And so she says, well, because where I'm from, there isn't anyone that looks like you. And everything I know about black people is from TV, media, AIM, AOL, right? And so I want to have that. I want to use this time and space in order to familiarize myself and to get to know, quote unquote, the other, is what she said. And I find it very, very profound in that it shouldn't take 18, 19 years for someone to meet, quote unquote, the other. But what I did appreciate from that situation is that she knew and that she was acutely aware that when she gets done with school doing her 2 years at Alfred to become a nurse, that she would return back home to her home where it's just people that look like her, and that she had a missed opportunity to learn about someone else outside of her sphere of influence. And so, just to answer that question, it's what can you do, right, in that space? Like Kedron, she used every opportunity to learn about, right, the other, right, quote unquote, the other person. And so one of the things that you can do is to educate yourself, right, in order to bring about that change. Not relying on people like myself or Herb or even Tina or another person, but educating yourself, right, about who these people, who these individuals are that you share society with, and get to know them. And again, realizing that you have more in common than we do differences. But again, taking time to educate yourself.
A couple of things. Whatever your lane is, to your point, and honestly, in different times in our life, we have different lanes. When you were in college, that was your lane. Yours is music. Mine is business. So when you're in that lane, and I'm going to say this from a completely, obviously, a different perspective. I'm a white person. It is my responsibility to educate myself. It is not to say that I haven't said or done stupid shit, because I have, right? But when I get called out on it, it's my responsibility to not minimize the lens that it came to me in, recognize what I did, and then go learn more. That's my responsibility. It is not my responsibility to go to Pearl and say, Pearl,
Yeah, Tina?
is it okay if I get box braids?
Girl, I don't think that would look good on you.
All right? That's not her responsibility to educate me on appropriation. It's my responsibility to learn that. So whatever lane you're in, you will find something that you can drive home rather forcefully, because that's your lane. And it is our responsibility as white people of privileged men and women to educate ourselves, to acknowledge, to accept, and to learn. Another big thing, don't ever minimize somebody's lived experience. Period. Period.
That is all of the time in all situations ever. Don't minimize other people's experiences. I mean, I know this is Juneteenth, but parents do it to children all the time, husbands to spouses, friends to friends. It happens all of the time. It's not respectful, it's not helpful, and sometimes it breaks relationships. When you are in spaces that we're talking about, it could be detrimental. It could be the difference between saving a person and not. So, one more question.
Tina, when did you want to start helping people?
When did you want to start helping people?
I do, actually. I do. So honestly, I think I have always had a spirit. I was always the underdog. So I wanted to make sure nobody else was the underdog. So I didn't think it was helping people. I just thought it was making sure that everybody around me was okay. And then when I became a firefighter, that really sealed the deal for me. But it started way back when.
Thank you for the question. So I'm going to end with a story of my own. The first time I did Juneteenth, it was, I think, 3 years ago, and I met Christine at a roundtable discussion at Pittsford schools when we were talking about what do we do, how do we figure this out? And we sat next to each other at the table, and I was telling her about Juneteenth, and she was like, oh my gosh, you have to do it again. I didn't know about it. I was like, I'm not doing it again. It was a lot of work, and it drove me crazy. She's like, no, you have to do it, you have to do it. It'll be so great. We'll get a committee, and everyone will help you, and it'll be fantastic, and oh my gosh, it'll be great. And I was like, okay, if there's a committee, and I'm not doing all of the work by myself, I think we could probably do it again. And so the next year, we had a committee, and we had lots of help, and people were really into it and interested, and it was fantastic. And we had a historical walk, and we had gospel singers, and we had Herb again, because I made that call many, many times until he agreed. And it was fantastic, and I'm so glad I did it. But it was still a lot of work, and I was like, okay, you know, it was great. And I went to Pittsford Rotary, and I did a presentation what we did because they sponsored us. They gave quite a bit of money the previous year, and I just told them all about what we'd done. In particular, I was really fond of the art show. Like, I loved seeing the community art and the poetry that was brought in. But the guest speaker that day was Nazareth president Beth Paul. And she was like, what? Juneteenth in Pittsford? I hadn't heard of that. I really want to help and be involved. Like, how can I help? You know, and she explained that she wanted to do something since Juneteenth had become a national holiday, but as a university, students aren't in. Like, there isn't really a student population in the summer. And so she wasn't sure how to get involved, but she wanted to partner with us. And it has been such a blessing to have Nazareth University behind us to provide this space, to provide advertising, to provide the Peace Gardens that we're going to have the main show on, to provide the staff. We've worked with several members to make all of this happen. And again, it started from, let's do Juneteenth, and then Christine joining, and now Nazareth is joining. And again, like, when you first have ideas and you think, I want to do something, and I don't know how many people came, maybe 50 people came to the first Juneteenth celebration, and then we had a couple hundred last year, and I don't know how many people you guys are bringing this year on June 17th in Garland Peace Gardens, Nazareth College. What time? Art show starts at 11, 12 p.m. is the main thing. Seriously, you guys have to come see Kirsten Piper Brown, a soprano opera who was singing the ballads of Harriet Tubman. Unbelievable. I saw it at the RPO. I still get flutters remembering it. It is such a powerful piece. But seriously, it's step by step, and you build momentum. And I think, again, you're going to make mistakes, and you're going to fall, and it's going to be ugly sometimes, and you're going to get back up. But then when you do, you realize who's there with you, right? And someone says, hey, I can help you with that. I can lend a hand. It's the old stone soup, right? And this is the community. Like, this is our stone soup. What's yours? Thank you.